mastering electronic dance music.
Hey, welcome back to Mastering EDM with Logic Pro, and this is the 8th video in the series introducing mixing. Today I'm going to be covering modulation, and that's a variety of plugins. You will not actually find a modulation plugin, probably, because modulation covers a broad range of various things. So I'm going to pull up the bass here that we've had going, and I'm going to throw some modulation on it. The first modulation bit you'll probably hear is chorus. Chorus is... well, actually, first here, let me talk about how I'm going to do this video. I'm going to go through things very quickly because this video is, its modulation is very, it's used stylistically. It's not used for mixing in the sense of getting your track to sound how you want it to sound in the end mix. It's more so, how do you want the production to sound? How do you want this particular bass line to sound initially, and then mixing it down is using other tools most of the time. So you can use this for mixing a little bit, which I'll cover in a second, but most of the time it's used for stylistic purposes. So you have chorus here, and right now it just kind of makes it sound dead. Which kind of kills some of the sound, but if I turn up the intensity, you can see that chorus starts to do some interesting stuff. Off the bat, it kind of makes it sound stereo. That's one of the things that modulation is typically used for. It's in a sense of mixing, it's used to make things sound like they're in stereo when they typically aren't. So, or when they actually aren't, rather. So that's chorus. Chorus is a sound. It's pretty obvious when someone's using chorus. You get this wiggling sound almost. And then there's a couple others. So assemble is an advanced form of chorus. It's basically, it sounds more intense. But otherwise, it sounds the same as chorus. And it just go through the settings, try to tweak them, and see what they do. There's not much use explaining too much of them except mix. Mix that's the original sound is 0%. 100% is the modified sound. Intensity, listen to it because it varies by way of modulation, what the intensity really does. The rate is just the speed at which it modulates. So the reason I haven't said what it's modulating is because that depends on the plugin. And so I'm going to go to flanger here. And this one kind of like takes this duplicate of the sound and then plays it over top of it, and you get this phasing sound almost. So it's got an interesting sound there. And flanger, and so then I'll go to the phaser here. And this kind of gets like a chewy sound. That's one of the things I've heard. Yeah, chewy. It kind of sounds like a chewy sound. I don't know why, but that's the word associated with phasers. So, in my opinion, it fits, but I don't know why it fits. So, phasers kind of got like this weird sort of sound. Anyway, that was a really pathetic imitation of it. But here we go. So it's got some pretty funky stuff that it does there. And there's one other one that actually tremolo is very important. But let me go to switch to the ring shifter here. I've heard this a lot in risers where you get it's right before the drop, it's doing the build, and then you have this this sound it's typically a staccato sound or a vocal, and there it goes. So that's basically it. It's kind of got like this warbling sound. It sounds better if you have it on a track with more. Here we go, let's try this. Here we go. Here we go, this will be obvious. So that's basically the sound of that one. What it's doing, I'm not entirely sure. Okay, that's kind of annoying. There we go. So, so what it's doing, I'm not entirely sure, but long story short, it's an effect that you can use, and it depends where you want to use it and stuff like that. I've seen the ring shifter typically in build-ups right before a drop. Now, tremolo is modulation that is very important because this one is not as it doesn't manipulate the sound as much. What this is just basically a form of automatic panning. So right now it's at a depth of 100%, which means it goes all the way from one side of the speakers to the other side of the speakers. Now I'm going to set this over a low period so you can kind of hear what it's doing. It's just panning back and forth. And this is the frequency. You can make it go really fast, or you can make it go really slow. And this is synced on the left side here, so it syncs up to the music. And I've seen some people, what they do is they take the phase and they make it so it's the same. So the volume is automating the same for the both sides, whereas opposed to this one is going up and this one is going down. So you phase at 0 degrees, and the same thing's happening. And then I've seen them do this. Set it to 1/4. And then you have something similar to sidechain compression there. I personally don't like the way this sounds with this tremolo. There's something called Stormgate, which you could do something. It's basically the same concept as tremolo, except for instead of basing it off an oscillator, you're basically drawing in the patterns. So you get some pretty interesting sounds with tremolo. But all it is it's just it's basically running a low frequency oscillator, and that's just as it's going up and down, it's changing the volume, and that just depends. How it's changing it depends on the settings you have here. Symmetry kind of lets it lean to one particular side. Smoothing is how smooth the volume level changes. It can be rigid, which just lets it bounce back and forth. So let's do this here. Actually, set to a longer period. So there you can see, and if I smooth it, it kind of just goes back and forth. It doesn't jump. So you could do some interesting stuff with that. And so later on, I'll talk about when I get to more about making a final song in the series that I'm going to be doing after the brief touch on music theory that I'll do. I'm going to be talking about when you shouldn't do stuff like that, because one of the interesting things is it's typically considered bad practice to put tremolo on a bass line. So you should keep that in mind. There are certain things that you don't want to do, and another one that you want to kind of stray from is using too much modulation on something that's supposed to sound bright, because in that case, what modulation can do is it can cut out the treble and affect the sound of it. So if you want something to be bright, the last thing you want to do is throw modulation on it. So there's general guidelines that you should work with. I won't cover too much of those right now because it's better suited for a particular situation that is offered to me. And so if you guys ask a particular situation, so I've got this and I was wondering, do you think it would sound okay if I put modulation on it? And generally the rule of thumb is, like I said, if it's a bass line or drums, you don't want to put too much modulation on it. If you have a drum loop, you can put automation on it. And or not automation, modulation, sorry. Modulation kind of gives drum loops an interesting feel and a groove to them, but you don't want it to be on your kick drum. You don't want to be on your bass line, and typically you don't want modulation to be on your drop synth. If you have a heavy drop synth, you don't want it on there, because then it kind of it doesn't sound like a solid drop. It sounds like a swimming drop. And that's typically not a good thing. So long story short, if you want the track to sound flowing and you want it to kind of sound like it's floating, basically, then throw modulation on it. If you want it to sound punchy, solid, or clear or crisp, don't throw modulation on it. So that kind of clears up most of the situations as to when you want to put it on and when you want to take it off. But you could break the rules if you know what you're doing and you know why you're doing it. And so keep that in mind. Rules are made to be broken, as I said in one of my earlier videos. So but that's essentially modulation. You have something is oscillating and it's changing a setting and ends up in a change in the sound. So so I didn't go into too much detail with all those because, like I said, they're effects more so than anything else, other than using a chorus to like spread over the stereo spectrum. But otherwise, just throw it on, go through the presets, see what you like, tweak them up, and just have fun with those, because those are it's all stylistic. You don't have to worry too much about focusing in on making it sound perfect by way of getting the bass right, getting the treble right, because that's it's stylistic. So enjoy working with modulation and enjoy making your track sound funky with it. And in the meantime, thank you for watching, and I'll have some stuff coming up here pretty soon, and so keep your eyes peeled for that. And until then, I got another video coming out every Saturday, so look out for those too. Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe, like, and comment, and all that stuff. See ya.